Hey, have you ever felt like the economy is just this giant, super complicated machine with 1,000 different buttons and dials that nobody understands? Well, today we're going to pop the hood on that machine. We're going to figure out who's actually pulling the levers, and more importantly, what those levers even do. Right? We hear these words on the news all the time: recession, inflation, interest rates, and they have a real impact on our jobs, our savings, our everyday lives. So the big question is, who's actually in control of all this? Who is steering the ship? That's exactly what we're going to get to the bottom of. So, to really get a handle on how the economy is managed, let's try a different way of thinking about it. Forget the machine for a second. Instead, think of the economy like a living, breathing thing. It has its own natural rhythm, a pulse that speeds up and slows down all on its own. And that pulse, well, it has a name. It's called the business cycle. It's just the natural rise and fall of economic growth over time. You can literally think of it as the economy's heartbeat. And if you can understand this rhythm, you're going to understand everything else we talk about today. This cycle basically moves through 5 different stages. It starts with growth, gets to its absolute peak in a boom, then it starts to cool down into a recession, hits rock bottom in a slump, and then finally it starts the climb back with recovery. So let's take a quick walk through each of these stages. First up is the growth phase. This is when things are generally feeling pretty good. Think of it as the economy getting stronger, like it's been working out. More jobs are created, wages start to go up, and there's just more money flowing around. You can feel that positive momentum. And that growth leads to the next stage, the boom. This is the peak, the absolute highest point of economic energy. Production is maxed out, employment is super high, but here's the catch: they've stopped increasing. It's the moment of greatest strength, but it's also the point right before things start to head downhill. Because after that peak, you get the cool down, a recession. People start buying less, so demand for stuff drops off. And of course, companies see this and they start cutting back on production. All of a sudden, you've got more stuff on the shelves than people wanting to buy it, and the economy starts to shrink. The lowest point of that shrinkage is the slump. This is also called the trough, and it's pretty much the worst point for an economy. Economic activity is way down, unemployment is high, and overall growth is actually negative. It's a really tough time for pretty much everyone involved. But, what goes down must come up. After the slump, the cycle turns. The recovery begins. Bit by bit, confidence starts to come back. People slowly start spending again, and demand for products begins to rise. This kicks off a whole new positive phase. And boom, we're right back at the start of the cycle again. Okay, so this whole up and down cycle, that's totally natural. It's the normal pulse. But sometimes things can go really wrong within that cycle. Just like our living body, the economy can get sick. It can get a raging fever or a deep weakness that just won't go away on its own. And that's when someone has to step in. So let's talk about that fever first. That's high inflation. It's when the average prices for everything just keep going up and up. And what that really means is that the value, the purchasing power of your money is literally getting burned away. Now, a little bit of inflation is actually a good sign, but too much is a serious, serious problem. And then there's the economy's weakness. That's high unemployment. It's exactly what it sounds like. People who are able and willing to work just can't find a job. And that means the economy isn't firing on all cylinders. It's not producing at its full potential, and its overall strength just plummets. So what's the actual damage from these two sicknesses? Well, with high inflation, the cost of living skyrockets and businesses get scared to expand. With high unemployment, our entire national output falls and living standards drop for a lot of people. See? Neither one is a good situation. And that's precisely why governments and central banks feel like they have to step in and play doctor. So who are these economic doctors? Well, the first one up is the government, and it has its own special medicine cabinet, its own set of tools. This first toolkit is called fiscal policy. So what is fiscal policy? Really, when you boil it all down, it comes down to 2 big levers the government can pull. First, how much money it spends, and second, how much money it collects from us in taxes. That's it. By tweaking those 2 things, it tries to steer the whole economy. Let's see how that works. Okay, tool number 1 is government spending. When the government spends more money on things like building new roads or on schools and healthcare, it's basically injecting cash right into the economy. That can boost demand and create jobs. But there's always a catch, right? That money has to come from somewhere, and a lot of the time that means higher taxes for somebody. Which brings us to the second tool, taxes. This one has a super direct effect on all of us. So let's just ask a simple question. What happens when the government decides to raise our income taxes? Well, it kicks off a whole chain reaction. If taxes go up, you have less take-home pay. You have less money to spend. That means demand for goods and services starts to fall. Businesses see their sales go down, and they might have to cut back on production, maybe even lay people off. And of course, cutting taxes is designed to do the exact opposite, to put more cash in your pocket to hopefully encourage you to spend more. But hold on, the government isn't the only doctor in the room. There's another huge player with a totally different medicine cabinet. And this second toolkit is called monetary policy. Monetary policy is usually handled by a country's central bank, like the Federal Reserve in the US. Their toolkit is all about managing interest rates and the total supply of money in the economy. But for our purposes, let's focus on the single biggest, most powerful tool they have. And that main tool is, you guessed it, interest rates. You hear about this on the news all the time. So let's do the same thing we did with taxes. What actually happens when the central bank decides to raise interest rates? Well, for you and me, higher rates make it more expensive to borrow money for things like a car or a house. But on the flip side, it makes it more attractive to save your money. For businesses, their loans get more expensive, which can really eat into their profits. So the overall effect? It's designed to cool the economy down by getting everyone to spend and invest a little bit less. And believe me, this isn't just some abstract economic theory. Business leaders watch these rate changes like a hawk. One of them said it perfectly. Interest rates can help your company or hold it back. It can be a signal to either expand your business or pull back. In other words, when rates change, it's a direct signal from the central bank. It's either a green light telling businesses to grow or a yellow light telling them to be a lot more cautious. So there you have it. You've got these two huge toolkits, fiscal policy and monetary policy, and they're constantly being used to try and keep the economy's pulse steady. It is a delicate, nonstop balancing act, trying to fight the fever of inflation without accidentally causing the weakness of unemployment. And all of this leaves us with one big final question. With all these powerful tools, with all this knowledge, can this balancing act ever actually be perfected?